Welcome to another episode of Le Point des Experts. Today, I'm very pleased to have here with us Stephen Judge. Stephen is a clinical naturopath in Sydney, specializing in chronic digestive disorders and mental health. After 8 years in private practice, working alongside medical practitioners as a director at the first integrative and holistic medical center in Australia, Stephen has gained a vast amount of knowledge and experience in empowering his clients to understand the underlying causes of their symptoms and how to engage as an active participant in their healing journey as they learn to thrive and trust the inherent wisdom of their body. In this interview, we talk about what histamine is, symptoms of high histamine, causes and triggers, consequences on digestion and the connection between SIBO and histamine, pathology, treatment approaches, diet, and Steve's final thoughts to take home. As a reminder, everything that is discussed in this interview does not intend to diagnose or treat a medical condition, so please ask your healthcare practitioner before implementing any new treatment. Bonjour, welcome Steve to our video podcast. I'm very pleased to have you here. Thanks for accepting my invitation today.
Pleasure, lovely to be here.
And lovely to see you again. So today's topic is histamine. It's a very popular topic. Everywhere, everybody talks about histamine. So, would you like to just get started? Let's just telling us more about histamine and how important histamine is in the body.
Yes, sure. So histamine is, it's the technical definition of histamine is it's a biogenic amine, which really just means that it's a biologically active compound that's produced by all living organisms, so humans, plants, microbes such as molds and yeast. So histamine, we produce histamine all the time, for very specific and helpful reasons. Histamine, like in the context we're talking about it within illness, like it gets a bad rap for its potential to cause issues.
Yeah.
If we're not handling it properly. But it's useful to understand first what histamine is and why we produce it in the first place, because it's an essential molecule. Histamine essentially acts as a signaling molecule in the body, and it has multiple functions that are very important. One of these, which is very well known by most people, is that it's a mediator of the allergic reaction. So when people hear the word histamine, what everyone typically thinks of is allergies. But histamine plays many other roles in the body, which are typically not considered by most people, including in the medical profession. So histamine is a neurotransmitter. So it plays a role in cognition and memory and neurotransmission and the sleep-wake cycle. It's an excitatory neurotransmitter, so it's stimulating. It's important for wakefulness and arousal. So histamine is a modulator of inflammation in our immune responses, and it is also a regulator of our digestive function. It's very important for helping us make hydrochloric acid, which is why we'll get into it, but why so many people with histamine intolerance have very chronic reflux. Histamine is the vasodilator as well, so it constricts bronchial and uterine muscle tissue. It's incredible how many roles it plays in the body. So there's 4 different kind of histamine receptors in the body, right, and 8 organ systems which it affects and is involved with, depending on where it's being released. So histamine intolerance is essentially what develops when too much histamine accumulates in the body due to a reduced capacity to detoxify and clear it out from the body.
Right, so, that's very good. That's very good to specify that. Yeah, so it's not really an intolerance per se, really. It's just too much histamine, which is kind of blocked, and it can't really escape being released, right?
Exactly, yeah. So remembering that we are constantly making histamine on purpose all of the time, in certain places at a certain times, and it has a very specific job. It's not the enemy, so to speak. It's just people develop issues and quote-unquote histamine intolerance when there is suboptimal clearance and detoxification of it. That's essentially histamine intolerance.
Wow, that's very important. Yeah, thank you for specifying that. And you're totally right. Sometimes people think that histamine is the bad guy, whereas it's not really, right? So
it's a subtle but important mindset shift in all of this.
Yeah, and clarification. Yeah, absolutely. And so you mentioned that we have different types of receptors, right? Four types of receptors in different parts of the body. So the symptoms can be when we have too much histamine. So the symptoms can be affecting all of many parts of the body, right? So and you just mentioned some of the symptoms when people can have too much histamine.
Yeah. So the main symptoms of histamine intolerance. So histamine intolerance is not an allergic reaction. It's very different to an allergic reaction or a true allergy. However, if you are histamine intolerant, people can display with symptoms of what people might think are allergies. So nasal congestion, an itchy nose and sneezing, runny nose, watery eyes. So if anyone has, had testing and been told you don't have allergies, but they have all these symptoms which appear to be an allergic reaction, they're probably actually a bit histamine intolerant. So there's all that kind of classic respiratory symptoms people can experience. And also like very itchy skin and unexplained hives, eczema, rosacea, kind of inflammatory skin symptoms. With digestion, people can present with all manner of gut symptoms, bloating, excessive gas, irregular bowel movements, but very, very specific symptoms of histamine intolerance related to the gut are chronic reflux and also diarrhea. It's not a hard and fast rule, but the reflux and chronic diarrhea are two really key gut symptoms people can experience with histamine issues. Like we were talking about before, it can manifest in the nervous system. So people with histamine intolerance can be presenting with very frequent chronic recurrent headaches and migraines. Also insomnia, brain fog. It can also manifest in the cardiovascular system. So people are experiencing arrhythmias, palpitations. People with histamine intolerance tend to low blood pressure as well because of its role as a vasodilator. Joint pain and inflammation is another classic sign. And also in women, it can manifest as pretty excruciating period pain because of histamine's role in smooth muscle contraction in uterine muscle tissue. So they're kind of the key symptoms. And what we notice clinically, at least, is that histamine intolerance does appear to be more common in women, or it's just maybe being picked up more easily in women. But the theory there is because of histamine's relationship to estrogen. So histamine and estrogen liberate each other and reinforce each other. So if one's high, it tends to increase the other. So with those list of symptoms, some very, very key clues for women is if they experience some of those symptoms, particularly insomnia, headache, migraines, digestive upset, around the period of ovulation, but more commonly in the premenstrual phase, because it's when estrogen tends to be a bit higher in the cycle relative to progesterone. So I see this a lot in clinic with women who, are not doing too bad throughout most of their menstrual cycle, but come that 1 to 2 weeks premenstrual phase, they start to develop insomnia, headaches and migraines, anxiousness, diarrhea, reflux. So that's an interesting little clue for women as well.
Totally. Yeah, I see these all the time. Yeah, you're totally very right with that. And also, would you mind if we get back just to the connection between histamine and digestion and, digestive issues? As you know, I treat a lot of people with SIBO and you may too, I'm sure. And there's a big connection there. It's very often people get almost, obsessed about, histamine. I need to, reduce my histamine food. Oh my God. Or I have MCAS maybe, very, very sensitive people. They not tolerate most of the supplements or most of the foods. What can you tell us about this connection with histamine and the gut?
Yes. So essentially, histamine that is, coming into our body from the outside world, so to speak, so from food, namely, we should be consuming that food which may have some histamine in it or a lot of histamine in it. But like we were touching on before, our body should be capable of clearing it, detoxifying it, getting it out of the gut. So there is an enzyme that's made in the body, but particularly in the lining of the wall of the small intestine, called diamine oxidase, or DAO for short. Just call it DAO. So DAO is the DAO enzyme is found throughout the body, that is particularly concentrated in the epithelial lining of the gut wall, particularly the small intestine. So we should be secreting DAO enzyme to neutralize and clear histamine that's coming through the gut. But if the DAO enzyme production is compromised because somebody has an inflamed gut wall, leaky gut, intestinal hyperpermeability, which, as we know, is classically a big driver and perpetuating factor of leaky gut, is having SIBO and this overgrowth of bacteria in the wrong place. This is when histamine intolerance can develop, because our body is no longer making the key enzyme that's needed to get it out of the gut, and particularly the small intestine. So it's cool to understand that, because I like to explain to my clients that, look, it appears you are a bit histamine intolerant, but as long as you understand it's not something you should be stuck with forever, becoming histamine intolerant is a symptom of a deeper problem. And the core, main, deeper problem, so to speak, that has, driven this histamine intolerance is the SIBO, the leaky gut, and the gut dysbiosis.
Yeah. So basically, once we correct the cause of these intolerance and this poor production of DAO and, of course, inflammation, things should get back to, normal, or they should get better. So that's very important to understand. And so, Steve, can you tell us, are you a fan of testing for histamine, or what's your approach? Because there are different schools and different, school of thoughts. And what do? Do you test, or not really? What do you think about testing?
Yeah, I don't really get into specific testing for histamine intolerance, so to speak, because, like I was just saying, I look at histamine intolerance as a symptom of a deeper problem. So to my knowledge, there is no, unified or agreed upon one test. There is no one test for this. But in my experience, the easiest and quickest way to determine if someone is histamine intolerant, which is written about in the literature, is to put someone on a low histamine diet. And it should be pretty obvious within 2 to 4 weeks, but usually pretty quickly, if someone is histamine intolerant, because they immediately feel better, or, a significant reduction in their symptoms.
Right.
So with testing, I guess it's also important to consider that histamine intolerance, it's a diagnosis of exclusion as well, because the symptoms are it's such a vast list of symptoms. You've got to also go through the process of making sure you don't have true allergies. So I typically make sure people have had allergy testing and making sure that's not contributing to their symptoms. So I know that some people recommend you test for whole blood histamine levels. So blood testing looking at histamine, blood levels of the DAO enzyme, and gene testing looking at, someone's potential to create the DAO enzyme or not. But I just rarely bother with these. I mean, I always give people the option. I just say, look, on my end, it's not really going to change my treatment direction. I would prefer, and these tests are not, entirely reliable So if people are going to look at testing, I'd prefer for them to just go with trialing a low histamine diet, see how they feel. Most people respond very obviously and very quickly, like they respond well. And so then it's pretty obvious someone's histamine intolerant also based on their history and symptoms. So I'd prefer they invest testing, cut to the chase and look at SIBO and microbiome testing. Because that's really, all the appropriate just blood tests we need in general, because that's really what's driving it. So I just kind of get straight to that with testing.
Totally. Yeah, thank you for specifying that and for sharing your point of view, of course. I think that most of naturopath, we really share the same opinion about histamine and testing. Even France say different things sometimes. Doctors that go, very heavy on testing, but then, it's a clinical presentation really. So thank you. I appreciate it. And so, well, of course, without going very deeply to the treatment, because treatment is, every person is different, every case is different. Any few tips that you'd like to share?
With treatment?
Yes.
Yeah, totally. So when I first meet people, we obviously take quite a comprehensive history. And if people are not aware of histamine intolerance and that was even a thing, the first thing I will do with treatment is look, here's a low histamine diet template. I just want to see if you respond to this to confirm, if you're histamine intolerant. And I will also, at a minimum, send them off for blood tests, because I just want to make sure we don't miss anything obvious that's affecting the gut or the nervous system or deficiencies and all that kind of stuff. So while we are getting them to trial a low histamine diet and go get some blood tests, at the very minimum, I keep it pretty basic to begin with, very safely assuming that, the person in front of me has a degree of SIBO and dysbiosis, and they've usually got a lot of gut symptoms. I'll usually start the gut process treatment by putting people on some partially hydrolyzed guar gum, PHGG for short. It seems to be so well tolerated by people, even with SIBO, to just start to reduce some of the gut symptoms and get the bowels right and just get their gut function a bit stronger before we typically move on to the stronger treatment in a month or two, which involves, as you would know, if someone is positive for SIBO and gut dysbiosis, I do frequently use herbal antimicrobials to deal with bacterial overgrowths. So, the berberine and oregano and clove oils and pomegranate herbal medicine, cinnamon herbal medicine, all that kind of thing, and garlic, depending on the results and the person.
And Steve, can I ask you, do you find that these very sensitive people to histamine, do they normally tolerate well the antimicrobials, especially the herbs? What do you find that they can tolerate them, or mix of
50-50. There is a subset, maybe a large subset of people with histamine intolerance so I don't take them through that very textbook approach. Like, cool, here's a few supplements, go get your bloods and a SIBO or microbiome test done. When you come back, we'll put you on an antimicrobial protocol. A lot of people do very well just going through that, but the large subset of people who that process, getting straight into that solid treatment seems to make them significantly worse, are people who fall under these categories of mast cell activation syndrome, chronic inflammatory response syndrome, quite a lot of people with quite significant autoimmune conditions. No, you're right. These people don't tolerate those well. So in my clinic, it's about 50-50, and I will explain to them at the first appointment, based on getting to know them and their symptoms and their history, whether or not I'm going to take them straight into that solid treatment or not. And if people, because I also get a lot of people coming to me who've tried it already and they know it triggers them.
Yeah.
So even if someone is very histamine intolerant, and they've got SIBO and dysbiosis, but they can't tolerate this style of treatment, we need to go a bit lower and slower, and really we'll begin some foundational, very gentle treatment for gut dysbiosis, like the PHGG, maybe some very gentle herbal medicine, But there's a huge focus for these people around first supporting and regulating their nervous system. So of which we may use all manner of different types of minerals and herbs and relaxation techniques and lifestyle changes. And for some people, I'll even refer them on to very specific brain retraining and nervous system regulating programs to do first. Because these people, in my opinion, and not just mine, but there is such a chronic inflammatory response going on, and it's actually on a very unconscious level being perpetuated and driven by this very unconscious perception of fearing that they're going to react to a supplement. Because these people have often been through quite a lot, like they've been feeling very sick for a number of years and have reacted to so many supplements and treatments over the years that they're now stuck in this state of always kind of perceiving and expecting that something's going to trigger them. And it's a very, very difficult space to get out of. And so for these people who cannot tolerate that herbal antimicrobial, textbook kind of treatments for SIBO and leaky gut, we will start there with nervous system regulation.
Yeah.
And so within that, perhaps some brain retraining courses and techniques, and also some very foundational nervous system support.
Yeah. Thank you for mentioning that. I totally agree with you. And I've seen quite a few of those super sensitive people. And I think, starting by retraining the nervous system, calming them down, and with some, emotional work, it is fundamental before being able to get it in with more, with stronger antimicrobials, with just normal treatment, actually. Yeah, you're right. There's a lot of fear in some of these people. Yeah, a lot of fear. They've been through a lot, and I think some cases are more chronic and more just dedicated, difficult than others. Yeah, totally. Yeah. And then do you believe in taking down enzymes, or, the classic ones like quercetin or vitamin C or Prevent? Do you like some of those supplements or what not?
Yeah, I'm not sure what your experience is with this, like histamine intolerance and clients, but some of these supplements like quercetin, zinc and C, Prevent, some herbal medicines like Perilla and Nigella. It's one of those things where there's quite a number of different options of things that could help stabilize mast cells and give people relief. But it seems very hit and miss at the same time. Like one person with histamine intolerance might take quercetin and it's life-changing and it gives them so much relief. Someone else that doesn't do anything. But if I had to pick a few things to begin with, I do use quercetin quite a lot. Not because it does have that mast cell stabilizing effect, but as we know, it also helps to reduce leaky gut quite significantly. It does help with estrogen detoxification, which helps the histamine intolerance. So I do use quercetin quite a lot. I do also use, again, because there's usually such a strong nervous system component to this, and because some people have too much of the neurotransmitter histamine affecting their symptoms, I do usually, at the beginning, give people nutrient supplementation for methylation to make sure they're methylating. So a lot of magnesium. I might try people on a very gentle, semi-unactivated B complex and a zinc and B6. That's typically how I go in. The Prevent I will absolutely consider for people who are very histamine and seem to have chronic diarrhea, but I won't use Prevent for people who are constipated, because it does tend to slow everything.
Yes, it tends to, unless, someone really drinks a lot of water, but it has these astringent action as well, a little bit. So you're right. I like it. I use it quite a lot. And
Prevent is one of those things. I've had a lot of clients take Prevent and they're like, wow, I feel so much better.
And I actually even have a real protocol for different conditions. And I think the dosages that they use, and they mix also some of the products. So the dosages they use sometimes is even more, I think, more important than what maybe we use in clinic. So, but it's I like it. Yeah. And then of course we have the DAO enzymes, and sometimes it's helpful, sometimes it's not. Sometimes people love it.
Yeah. I've had good feedback. It does seem to work. It's just expensive.
It is very expensive. Yeah.
So it's not a first line intervention for me. I always give people the option to at least know they can take that if, they're going to go out and they know they're going to have a high histamine meal or a wine or something. I'm like, look, at least take the DAO enzyme.
Yeah.
For those occasions.
Exactly.
Vital relief.
Keep it for, rare occasions. Yeah, absolutely. And so that, you mentioned that already. So at the beginning, maybe it's a good thing to try a low histamine diet just to see whether stomach is really kind of intolerant or sensitive to histamine foods. And it can be a life-changing experience, right?
Yeah, like consistently, people who are obviously very histamine intolerant, have never heard of histamine tolerance. I show them the list. I say, look, this is not a forever thing. It's just to get you relief because you're so unwell. And we'll treat the deeper issues so you can get off this. And it's the relief people get from the diet is incredible. It's almost instant. Some clients will email me in 3 or 4 days and go, I just wanted to let you know, after years of stuff, not getting, within 4 days, they're 80% improved.
Yeah. And also, it's important that, we remind people that actually the histamine is like having a bucket, right? So it's a daily bucket of histamine that everybody can tolerate or not. So it's adding, the tomatoes, the wine, the chocolate, the strawberries and avocados and everything, all the, high histamine foods in one day. At the end of the day, it may be too much to tolerate.
Yes, exactly. And you may have noticed this, when you Google, low histamine diet and foods, it's every website list book looks different. Yeah. Different lists. And this is they say this is okay, they say this isn't. So I've got my own list, which is, I would say, not the most super comprehensive one, but it's just a list of the top 20 to 30 foods, let's say.
Okay, that's good.
That are really hardcore histamine or histamine mobilizing. I say, look, I know there might be others, but just focus on this for now. And 95% of people, that was enough to get them a lot of relief.
That's very good. Yeah, we follow here, there's a Swiss histamine association, I think it's called the SIG. So they have a pretty comprehensive list, and also one by alphabetical order, which is not handy. But yeah, I understand, and I totally agree.
We've done other ones.
Yeah, it can be tricky. Yeah. So, what are your, would you like to mention anything else about histamine, or your final thoughts about, histamine sensitivity and tolerance?
I would say, I guess just to reiterate, histamine isn't the enemy or the problem. It's just, if you're not clearing it out of the body, you will develop symptoms. But the fact that you're not clearing it out of the body and developing symptoms is a symptom most of the time of SIBO, leaky gut, and gut dysbiosis. So histamine intolerance is predominantly a symptom of the gut. And also in terms of the neurotransmitter side of histamine, it's very important to make sure people are addressing their methylation kind of capacity and function. So as you know, methylation is a detoxification pathway, and it has many roles and benefits, but one of its core roles is to clear histamine out of our cells. So as long as people are being guided by someone to really fix their gut and improve their methylation status, and also, for women in particular, if they're listening, to start to notice if there are some particular symptoms which are, every month, like clockwork, significantly worse premenstrually, especially if it's insomnia, anxiety, headache, migraine, digestive symptoms, and that kind of thing. However, I will say I think it gets missed in men a lot because, even I'm guilty. Like I've written a few blogs and things, and it's the focus is always on women because of the estrogen factor. But I do see histamine intolerance in men very frequently. And in men, there's obviously not this fluctuating estrogen factor, but the men I see typically are presenting with very chronic reflux, and irregular, all manner of gut symptoms, but especially if it's accompanied by reflux, and, recurrent headache and migraine in men. I see this a lot too, and like chronic unresolved joint pain. Yeah, and I have noticed in the past year or so, I kind of sat back and went, oh yeah, right. Like I've started to realize pretty much everyone with an autoimmune disease is to some degree histamine intolerant. Because of this cytokine inflammatory storm that's going on with autoimmunity. It's like if there's a lot of histamine in the diet, it seems to flare their symptoms.
It will trigger, it will, get symptoms worse. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, and again, if anyone's listening to this and thinking, oh my gosh, like I think this is me, it's like, cool. That's nothing to, it's not a life sentence. It's just really cool to understand all this and know what's going on, and then understand it's a symptom of a deeper problem and it can absolutely be resolved. Some people, it's a bit easier. They just, do their gut protocols and work on their diet and lifestyle and their sleep and they're good. And other people were saying before with MCAS and SIRS, it might be a bit trickier and we may need to do a bit of nervous system work to begin with. And I should have prefaced all that nervous system talk with making sure that you are not living in mold.
Yes, thank you for mentioning mold. Yeah.
Yeah, I've got that. Because if someone cannot tolerate treatment, there tends to be one of two main things going on. This nervous system element where the danger sensing part of the brain is on overdrive and they're constantly perceiving that they're going to get triggered, so they do, and that there's all this nervous system stabilizing to do. Or, like I see a lot in clinic, someone is not aware that their house has a lot of hidden mold and they are constantly inhaling mold biotoxins, and that is perpetuating this chronic inflammatory response in their body and is a major reason why they can't tolerate anything, supplements, foods. So a big priority thing to rule out and get checked if you're one of these people who is doing all the things and not getting better and you're getting worse. Please make sure you have your home environment assessed professionally by a mold professional, because mold can be hidden and be a significantly worse situation than you realize.
Absolutely. Yeah. And mold I think it's a much bigger issue than we think in terms of how many people can be affected by mold, or have been affected by mold maybe in the past, and even if they move maybe to a better place, maybe they still have, mycotoxin, issues. So,
on my intake form for new clients, I do have a question that says, are you aware of if you have previously or currently been exposed to mold? And obviously if it's hidden, some people aren't sure. But I do meet people who are right, oh yeah, it's in the bathroom, there's some under the bed.
Yeah.
And they're presenting very histamine intolerant. I say, look, yes, you've got a huge list of symptoms, but I think you've got to deal with that first, because I don't think anything I do will hold or work that well unless you deal with that.
Thank you. Thank you for answering that. I do the same now, and especially my, all the SIBO patients that I see. Some of them, as you mentioned, are just, straightforward cases. Everything is fine. We can treat them all good. And some of them are really, really sensitive. And all these sensitive patients, it may be like a mold issue, a hidden mold issue. And sometimes I think also Lyme. That's the other two things. Yeah, mold and Lyme. Yeah.
So step one, make sure there's no mold, and then move forward.
Yes. But because the mycotoxins issues, they can be presenting as digestive issues and all types of symptoms like a very systemic issues. So it is those types of people. So it's good. Thank you for bringing it up, Steve. That's really important.
All right. I almost forgot.
Well, we talk about histamine. We start from histamine, and then it's everything is connected. So that's really good.
Right.
Well, thank you, Steve. I think it was really, really thorough and great, presentation about histamine today. So it was really interesting. Thank you for sharing your thoughts and your time with us. And maybe I'll see you soon for another topic.
Pleasure. I love that. Thanks, Rosarian.
Thank you.